Let's talk about how to make money online, flipping websites and building
Yeah.
sites, man. Before we get into that, just tell the viewers a bit about yourself.
So I'm just that classic sort of serial entrepreneur, making money online kid. Have a couple exits. I like to say I have two exits and 1,000 failures. The truth is I probably have 12,000 failures. But was an affiliate marketer as a little kid when I was 15, 16 years old. Was figuring out how to make money on the internet, and sold a nice little ad network when I was pretty young. And then for years worked much more corporate sort of strategy consulting gigs. Most recently built a little strategy consulting firm, and I sold that in 2020 very sort of serendipitously. It did not happen because of the pandemic, but it was serendipitous timing that started before and ended up closing in the middle of the pandemic. And over those years on the side, I was always buying and flipping websites, and I've flipped a bunch of websites in my life, and have failed on flipping a bunch of websites in my life. And so for the past year, I've become the website flipping guy on Twitter and started to try and build it on YouTube a bit, sort of teaching people how to buy cash flow positive websites and either hold them on their books as an investment or make them better and flip them for a multiple later on. So that's me.
What kind of sites are we talking? Affiliate sites, e-com?
So a lot of what I talk about is sort of content-based websites, and that's because it's sort of the easiest thing to wrap your head around. The monetization is what we call like programmatic display mostly. So that's just AdSense or an ad network
Yeah.
that you're placing ads. I have a big background in affiliate marketing, so the reality is affiliate marketing. All these things people talk about making money online or affiliate marketing or e-com. They're such vague and broad topics, right? Everyone will say like, how do I get into e-commerce? And so to finish that up, I'm working on an e-commerce roll up right now. So I'm buying up e-commerce brands and putting them into one holding company. But people will say, how do I get into e-commerce? The first thing I say is remove the E and ask me that question and listen to how ridiculous you sound, right? Because if someone said to me, how do I get into commerce? And say, well, what do you want to do, right? What do you want to sell? What a vague question. And the same thing with affiliate sites and affiliate marketing. You can be driving paid traffic to affiliate offers. You can be having SEO and organic traffic. You can be a creator and making affiliate commissions by sending people to, whatever product you're sending them to. But I normally talk about content websites because that is all websites have content on them, and there's a lot of different ways to get into monetization. So think like a news website or a blog. And part of the reason I go there is because e-commerce, for example, I can teach people a myriad of ways to make e-commerce sites better. But if you're new to it, you're just much more likely to fail with something that has that many moving parts. Like, are we talking about supply chain? Are we talking about fulfillment? Are we talking about returns? Are you running paid traffic? Are you doing organic? So content sites is the sort of the thing that I teach most, talking about flipping.
And is this, are we talking about highly niche content sites in any particular niche?
So not any particular niche, but definitely highly niche if possible, right? I think, you and I were talking about this before a bit, but in marketing, I sort of try and teach people, you sell one product to one customer. And so I'm not really a believer in doing, people say, oh, do what you love. I don't really believe in that. I believe in do what you're good at, right? But with that said, I try and push people to, if they're going to buy a website and they're newer to this, is to try and pick a niche that is at least vaguely interesting to them. Because the reality is they're probably going to spend a lot of time and effort working on this website in the future. And if it is something wildly esoteric and boring, it is just going to make their lives harder and more difficult. I'm a real believer in putting yourself in the path of success. So yeah, so niche content websites are the direction I try and push people.
Yeah. I mean, you've definitely got to enjoy what you do, or you just can't drag yourself out of bed every day to do it, can you? So it's very important.
100%.
And can you give us an example of, what's the smallest deal that someone can come along and do with the smallest amount of cash? Because we discussed this earlier, and you said, people shouldn't really think about buying and flipping websites if they don't have the cash to do it. But for someone wanting to get into this in the early stages, I'm thinking kind of young, doesn't have much money, maybe just out of college. and wants to try flipping their first website, what's the minimum amount they'd need to invest, and how would you go about it?
So people hate to hear this, but they always ask me how much money do I need to flip a website? And I always tell them the more, the better, right? And it's partially because when you're making incremental changes, at scale is where the value comes, right? So let's get extreme here and say you have $100 million. If you change your business by 1%, it makes $100 million. You just made $1 million, right? Like, and all you need to do is change it by 1%. If I take $100 business and I change it by 1%, I just made $1, right? So that it doesn't make sense there. So I think if you're young and you're wanting to get into this, that probably the way to go, you can start small. A couple $1,000s would be the smallest, $2-3 grand to be the lowest level I see as possible for a flip. With that said, if you're really skilled, if you're great at SEO or great at building email lists or paid traffic, you could do this with $0, right? Like the reality is all the tenets of how people buy businesses with zero money down. I could show someone how to do that, right? Like that's a mix of a little bit of debt or just a little bit of your money up front with normally what we call seller financing. So that means that the seller of the website or the business becomes the bank, loans you the money, and you pay them out over time. But a few $1,000s, or I'd say that if you really wanted to start with a few $1,000s, one of the smarter things, and I try and talk about this with people, is I'd buy a good expired domain. All right, so I'd go and spend $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 on an expired domain. And so that's going to be an actual domain name that has a lot of backlinks to it and once was a big website that somebody let expire and die. And the reason I say that is because it'll give you some direction. I think a lot of people just have no idea where to start and where to go. And you find a great expired domain in a niche you're interested in, you'll know what the website's going to be about, and build a website on that domain, because the authority that domain already has from being an old website will allow Google to rank it much more quickly. And it might even be getting traffic already from people looking for old articles and stuff. And so I think if you've got $1,000, the way to do this, in my mind, is either to partner with someone who has more money, or we can get creative on deal structure, or buy an expired domain for $1,000 and build a blog on it and start creating SEO-friendly content that way. And over the next 6 months, you won't need to build tons of backlinks. It will just become a little bit more self-fulfilling, and then flip that, right? Like I've actually, ironically, I talk about flipping, but I've made most of my money in my life building and then selling, right? As opposed to buying and then improving and flipping. The bigger wins I've had have come from building and then selling.
Oh, I'm exactly the same. I wouldn't even know how to begin in terms of buying any business, right? It's always been me building it and then either living off the cash flows or flipping it. Sure. And for people who have no idea where to even start, how would you go about finding one of these expired domains?
So I'll plug. I have a friend who has a marketplace called Juice Market. There's a few. ODYS Global, I think, is one. Basically, all the domain registrars will show you like dropped domains, right? We'll show you domains that people have let expire, and you can go find. But they're mostly auctions. And auctions are a scary world sometimes, right? Because from a psychological trigger, you say, I'm willing to spend $1,000 on this. Well, all of a sudden it's $1,100. Like, well, I would spend $1,100. And before you know it, you spent $3,000 that you don't have, right? And another thing I want to say quickly is whether you're buying a website or buying an expired domain, I would set aside a little extra money for growing and maintaining this website or domain, right? So let's say your budget is $2,000. I wouldn't spend more than $1,000 or $1,500 buying the website or domain, right? Because you're going to want to have some money for some plugins, and maybe you want to pay for some, someone to do some backlink building or some content. There's a myriad of things to break down. But honestly, a quick Google, my favorite tool in the world, I'm a college dropout. My favorite tool in the world is Google. A quick Google search for anyone that's watching into expired domain names will return a whole list of different places to find some.
Okay, and then when you're looking at domains, besides the niche on an expired domain it operates within, what's the minimum domain authority or domain ranking that you'd want
Sure.
and minimum traffic, if that's even applicable?
So, I mean, and I would say this is a great question because it even goes to website flipping or buying a business as well, buying a website that already exists as well. So the minimum authority is whatever you can afford, right? I hate to say that, right? But like, so for me, I'm probably not trying to buy, you might find it's so amorphous. It's a bit of an art. And this is why people should just start looking and understanding, and seeing what is ranking, right? Like looking at different websites that are already ranking in Google for things you might want to rank for, seeing what their domain authority is like. Because, you might find something, I would look over a domain authority of like 10 at a bare minimum, right? But what you're going to find is that like, the interesting thing about domains is you can own the word domains.com. It could have a domain authority of 0 and it probably is worth $3 million, right? So right. And so that's a hard metric to sort of, and I would tell you that it's absolutely worth $3 million because I'm sure you could go sell it to a registrar. But I would say probably a minimum DA of 10, a domain authority of 10. I would really look out.
Pretty low.
Well, I mean, you're talking about where you get off to the races. I mean, I probably would not buy a domain with a DA of 10, right? Yeah. But I think I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of someone who's got $500 and wants to like start this journey, right?
I think if they've got 500, then the probably best thing I would personally say to them is just create your own, dude. You haven't got the money, you've got to put in the sweat, right?
I would say that the barest minimum then in terms of ways that I know to turn on revenue streams, I would say like a domain authority of like 30 plus, because what's going to happen with 30 plus is you can automatically sell sponsored posts on your website. You can, which are essentially guest posts or backlinks. I mean, I won't call it selling backlinks because that's black hat in Google's eyes, but most people that are buying guest posts or niche edits, as they're called, on websites are looking for a backlink, essentially. And so with a domain authority of 30 plus, you're definitely going to be able to pull $25 plus for every, sponsored post you sell. And you're going to start having people reach out to you, right? There's marketplaces where you can list them, but people start reaching out to you. There's a website I sold, I still have access to it, last year, that has a DA of I think like 48, maybe 58, but it gets 3 or 4 requests a day, and each of those sell for like $150 a pop.
Yeah. And is this just because you listed it on guest posting marketplaces?
Actually, this is just people finding me. So guest posting has become such a big thing these days that what happens is people will use a tool like Ahrefs or some scraping tool, and they'll say, oh, I'm in this niche, I want to get guest posts or niche edits, i.e. backlinks edits in an article that exists on these websites. They scrape everyone's info and they just start mass mailing them, right? And so it's a pretty niche website. It's in the financial news space, in the cannabis space of financial news. So it's like very niche.
Oh, that's hyper niche right there.
Yeah. But so it allowed, us and the new owners to charge more, right, for a guest post than sort of if it were like a blog, like about everything you randomly love.
Dude, I'd never even thought about this. I mean, I've definitely looked at guest posts for backlink building when I've been doing my SEO, but I'd never ever thought about just buying a site or building up a DA on a site and flipping guest posts. That's got to be the easiest money I've ever heard anyone offer.
It is. I will say though, it's like one of those playing with fire things, right? It's like one of those hubris things. So you really want to avoid, you have to like bring your greed quotient down, because the moment you're selling 3 guest posts a day, that aren't, and you're not putting out 30 pieces of original content a day at the same time, is the moment that, listen, Google's algorithm is just smarter than you and me and everyone that I know, right? And so let's be candid in saying that this is a little what we call gray hat, right? Again, it's not illegal to pay for advertorial content, but it is illegal to buy backlinks in Google's eyes, right? So, and I think we can all understand why people are really buying these guest posts, unless you get a ton of traffic and they do want some of that traffic. But a lot of the go-to things for me when I talk about flipping content websites are, A, is the ad network a good ad network? Can we just switch out the code on the website, have a different ad network or outsource ad ops agency, essentially, make you make more money from the traffic that's coming in? And B, can you sell guest posts? because at the bare minimum, your guest post can pay for your content creation. You hate writing? Cool. You know, like sell one guest post a week at $50, pull in $200 and pay for, and use those to pay for original content to be written for your website as well.
Okay, I got two questions for you on that basis then. So first of all, who would you be paying for original content? Are there any websites you would go to hire freelancers and write original content?
Sure. It's funny because somebody asked me like 2-3 days ago. I've used Upwork religiously for many years.
Oh, we're gonna have to bleep that out and say Fiverr.com.
Well, the truth is, all jokes aside.
No, I'm just kidding. They're not.
No. But I mean, all jokes aside, I actually use Fiverr for things all the time, right?
Yeah.
Fiverr and Upwork are the same. Fiverr's very different place than when I first found it, right? Because when I first started using Fiverr, everything was $5.
You used to buy, 100,000 Instagram followers for $5.
Yeah, it's a very different world. Actually, Fiverr's become a real serious player in the like freelancer economy space now, right? And when it first started, it was much more very, very small tasks, right? And so finding good content for $5 was a really tough world back in the day, right? But Fiverr, Upwork, the reality is any of these places, they're marketplaces. And I say this about websites too. When you're looking at a marketplace instead of a broker, right? There is no sort of obligation to make sure that the quality is there. You have to base it off of peer review. So what I'd say with Fiverr or Upwork or Elance or anywhere, right, is that I would just really take your time digging and finding and looking over reviews, and you get what you pay for, right? Like that's really, really clear here. Now, there is a new concept that I'm toying with, and I don't want to suggest anyone do this yet because I'm trying to see if it can work. And if it can, it will solve everything for us. And I'm not sure if any of you have heard of something called like GPT-3 or GPT.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say that. Yeah.
And so what I'll say is that the content that AI produces right now is not on its own good enough, right? But what I would say is that I believe that we could start producing content that with some light editing would be the content that we need to rank websites, right? And then there's a couple tools that people can use to figure out like what is the right keyword density, right? Like, is there enough LSI keywords? Like, how am I creating SEO friendly content? And so I'm starting to test out AI generated content, then putting that into a thing that grades it from an SEO perspective, making the changes, and then making small human edits. Now, I'm not interested in doing that full time, but is it something I could find someone to do for $5? Probably, right? And create $100 pieces of content for $5.
I'm just going to share a note with the viewers so they understand, because they probably don't know what LSI is. It's latent semantic indexing, and it's a very fancy word in SEO just to say that Google will look at your article, and if your keyword is make money online, you need to stuff your article full of alternative phrases that mean the same thing. Sorry.
I get so like in the forest sometimes.
I'm just trying to think of the novices thinking, what did he say?
No. But I think so. Fiverr and Upwork are both good. You just got to dig. I mean, I've had horrific experiences on both, and I've had phenomenal experiences on both, right? And so the trick is just like finding someone that's good, not underpaying them. There's a reality here that I think that everyone just assumes that cheap. Everyone that has a small budget is trying to just be as cheap as possible.
Yeah.
And being budget conscious is important, but that being cheap is just you're slighting yourself. This is not 20 years ago. When I first started getting into building blogs when I was 16, and I'm about to be 33, like you could literally just spin random content, right, with content spinners that would just take words and replace them. And just throw them onto websites and Google would rank them. That's not a reality today. It's just today.
It's very hard work. And then my other question related to that was, when you're buying a site, or well, I guess in your case, it's only ever going to be if you're buying a site, what's your favorite ad network? Because you said one of the ways you make more money is just taking out a bad ad network and then putting in a better one.
Sure. So I think, to be very straightforward, and I just had a call with an ad ops company that made sure that I'm correct in the way I speak about it. When I say ad network, it's a very vague blanket term, right? In reality, a lot of the premium ad networks I suggest people are more like ad ops agencies. And so what that means is they take the same ad inventory that's on your website and then make it worth more. don't worry about how. It's, if everyone wants to Google it, it's through header bidding mostly, and a lot of AI about placement. Depending on, if I came from Facebook, I'm less likely to stay on the page as long, so they're going to pop less ads there. But ad networks, the go-to for everyone is AdSense. Obviously, that's Google's main ad. Google Ads, that's their main ad product. I always suggest people move over to something called Ezoic as soon as they can. There's other ones that Ezoic's not an ad network as much as an ad ops agency that uses AI to make, I mean, yes, they give you access to different ad networks, but they make the ads on your website worth more money. That's really all that anyone needs to know. And if they want to
traffic volume to make it worthwhile using them.
So listen, this is not a plug for me in any exciting way, but what I will tell you is that Ezoic does have a traffic minimum. So do their competitors like Mediavine and AdThrive and all of them. I actually just signed a contract with Ezoic last month, and anyone that I refer will have a 0 traffic minimums for Ezoic.
Okay, so perhaps you can share that link, and then I can share it with anyone.
I'll give you something on that afterwards. But that's a big difference for people. Now the reality is, if you're making, we spoke about this. If you only get 1,000 views a month, don't worry. You know what I mean? I hate to say this, but like, don't worry about eking out an extra 10% on the $80 you made last month, right? Or not even $80, the $10 you made last month, right?
Yeah.
You know, realistically, I would really worry more about making sure that you're getting more traffic, right?
Thinking ahead of my questions there, because I was going to say, what's the CPM on these?
So the reality is, I mean, the CPM as cost per meal, right? Or if we're going to sort of be breaking down what all these are, right? Meal meaning 1,000 in Latin. And actually, if we're talking about ad revenue, it's normally RPM, so revenue per meal, right? CPM being more of like a cost I spend. But the RPM, the revenue that you'll make for every 1,000 views, is really niche dependent. So that's actually a great way to circle back into sort of, if you're buying an expired domain or you're buying a website, if you're writing about gossip, right? Something that is very easy to get traffic for, but is very vague and broad, your RPM or your CPM is gonna be pretty low, right? So because it's just not niche, it's not really, there's not a lot of buying intent behind it, commercial intent as we call it. You might get $1, $2, $3, right? I think that the average is something like 10, right? Is like a pretty average RPM or eCPM earned, cost per meal, but
is there an easy way for people to find out the average RPMs for different?
You can look it up, but to be very honest with you, it's so dependent. I mean, you can just Google around, but it's like a mesothelioma. That's the classic one, is mesothelioma attorneys, right? Like that's like $100 per click, because so your CPM, if you're getting 10 clicks every 1,000, you're getting $1,000 CPM. That's ridiculous and crazy. But that also has to do with like how many ad placements you have, or do they make people leave the page? How many ads people get to see? Does it have something called lazy loading, which means that as you scroll down, there's a different ad, So what I'll say about something like Ezoic is that instead of it being just better ads, it's the same ad access. What they do is optimize their placement and loading and structure so that your CPM actually, or RPM actually, goes up even with the same ads. And so that's why that becomes like a really interesting addition for people. Yes, they actually do give you access to ad inventory from other networks that you probably aren't approved for normally, but like their model is more that it's a more efficient way of serving ads to people that in the long run makes you more money.
And what about growing the traffic? When you're buying a website, what's your favorite source of additional traffic? Is it paid? Is it SEO?
Sure.
Referrals?
So for me, the website that I want to buy is crushing it on organic search. And that is just Google, right? And that means they're just getting all their traffic from there. And there's a reason for that. I'm incredibly impatient. And I don't want, that's a long-term channel to grow. So you're going to keep growing that channel when you buy that site. But I would love for the traffic to already be strong from there. It also is nice because that just comes for free, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I'm a big newsletter guy. So a lot of stuff I talk about is often like, okay, let's keep going down this train of thought. You've bought a website about cars, right? About hot rods. I don't know, I'm making this up right on the spot, right? But it's getting lots of search traffic for people looking for things on hot rods. Well, yeah, you can improve that search traffic, and I would definitely recommend you get some like Ahrefs and and figure out which keywords to grow and build content and backlinks around that to grow that. But I would also say one of the easiest wins, clearly we're going to switch it over from AdSense to something like Ezoic. You're going to make another 10 or 20%, maybe 50, 100, depends how bad the ads were placed before. We're going to start selling guest posts or, for extra money if need be. But then I think it's always so really powerful to build a newsletter, right? Newsletters are really exciting right now. And I think that people feel like it's a barrier to entry because they don't know what to write for newsletters, right? Yeah. So we just, in that regard, we're just installing a pop-up plugin that says like, sign up here for our newsletter, or you could have a lead magnet that says like the 10 best hot rods you didn't know about, whatever. These are bad examples. But then people say, well, what goes in the newsletter? Why do people want to read it? Two things are going to go in the newsletter. First, all the new content that you make for your website that you want to rank organically on Google anyway, that's going to go into the newsletter, right? You're going to email that out to people and it's going to bring them back to your website. And then not only are they going to like your website, but you're going to make more ad revenue from them coming back to your website. Yeah. The other thing here is I think that people, I would never advocate stealing content. I would strongly advocate curating content. And so what that means is if anyone's ever read The Morning Brew, The Hustle, The Skim, any of these giant newsletters that sell for tens of millions of dollars, right? None of it's original content. They take news and they give it context by making it seem somewhat interesting. But they're essentially content aggregators. And so there's a couple tools that you can use to do that easily with newsletters. One is called Up Content. The other one's called Rasa, R-A-S-A, rasa.io. And both of them will just basically through RSS feeds, pull content from sources that are interesting for you in your niche, place them into a newsletter for you, and then you can just send it out, right? And so to be honest with you, those people are excited. If I write a blog article and someone with 5,000 subscribers picks up my blog article and sends it out to 5,000 people, I'm really excited. I'm ecstatic about that, right? Like there's no problem for me there. So you shouldn't feel bad about sharing other people's content, right? Like that's the whole purpose. They want views. And you're building authority in your newsletter. So for me, that's one of the lowest level, low-hanging fruit, easiest ways to like increase traffic is instead of just increasing new users, how are we creating a retention tool? How do we get the same users to come back to us the whole time? Because again, when we talk about RPM or CPM here, it's not uniques, right? We're not worried about how many unique viewers are here. It's about how many ads are served to people, right? So it doesn't matter. Obviously, you want more unique people, but in general, how do we create a retention tool that makes this so that if Google falls off or if paid doesn't work out? I'm a big fan of paid. I just don't ever advocate for people to go to paid traffic unless you're already a media buyer because they'd probably just be letting money on fire.
Yeah.
But for $20 a month, you could get a newsletter going and just doubling your traffic in a couple months without bringing any new traffic in, right? And so that's a really awesome tool, I think, for people in terms of channels to work on for free.
And if you're buying an existing website, what kind of multiple would you be paying on that?
So 10 years ago, I would have said that you're paying like 20x on monthly. So i.e. you're paying, and that was very normal, right? That when I on websites, when it was like you get 2 years like net revenue at most, right? Because it was an asset class no one knew about. Well, the past 3 years, I'd say you're paying a 3-year multiple on net revenue. And I would say that during the pandemic, so 36 times whatever the monthly net income is.
Okay.
I would say that this is going up day by day. And
really?
Yeah, it just has to, all equities markets on the planet. What's up? That's a gorgeous, gorgeous cat, man.
Thanks. They love to disturb the videos.
Beautiful eyes. I would say, like, if anyone that looks, I don't want to get esoteric and complex here, but if you look at any asset class during the past 12 to 24 months, right, during the pandemic, they've all gone up. Housing is up, broader equities markets, so stocks are up.
There's a lot of inflation arguments on that basis.
100%. So the same thing is happening here with websites in many regards, right? Like these websites are just selling for larger multiples right now. And that's for multiple reasons. I think it's because I think we're slightly in an equities bubble. And I think also the reality is that there's a lot of people that have made money, have made a lot of money. A lot of people have been left really screwed during this pandemic. But the people that have made money, the family office, the private equity firms, like have made a lot of money. And now they're looking to diversify into new asset classes. And you have there's these new holdings companies like Thrasio, right, which just buys up digital businesses, and they're a multi-billion-dollar company already, right? Like, you see smart money getting into this, and with that, what happens is prices go up, right? So probably about a safe bet is 3 to 3.5 times the yearly net revenue of a website or business. So 36 to 40 plus monthly income from a business. Yeah. A really great business, as we see in sort of venture-backed startups, will sell for much more, right? Because people believe there's a huge growth multiple to throw on it. But for what I tell people to buy, or I don't tell people to buy anything, when I consult people on buying websites, I always say I'd rather you overpay for a great website than try and find some deal and underpay, because that's how you're going to lose your shirt and lose all your money, because you don't know what you're doing, right? Like, already, if you pay, if I buy a website for $3,000 that makes $1,000 a year, right, without any improvements, and I just maintain it, that means I made 33% in dividends essentially in 1 year. Show me a single stock in the world that can do that. There's nothing. This is, from a investment perspective, the cash on cash return is astronomical. So
do you not take into consideration a certain depreciation in traffic? So if you don't put any effort into because the Google algorithm is looking for new content, so having updates to articles is quite an important flag for their algo to be able to rank you for certain search terms organically. If you don't put any effort into that, how, over what period would you model a depreciation in traffic?
So what I would say is there's two things. The first thing that I always tell people, and I have a due diligence checklist, right, of things that people should be doing. And one of the main ones is, if we're looking at organic search, for example, or any traffic channel, is traffic been stable or growing for the past 12 to 24 months, right? And that is sort of just, for me, like, again, Google's smarter than all of us, right? Is that, like, Google does 3-4 times a year algorithmic changes to their search rankings, right? And so if something has been stable or growing for 12 to 24 months, that means to me this website has gone through 6 to 8 algo changes, updates, and Google has still said, I still love you, you're still great, right? So it's not positive, but it's a pretty good indicator of its future, right? And so what I'd say to your other question about how do I model out depreciations, I wouldn't buy I really want to dispel the myth of passive income, right? Because I think that income can be almost passive.
Yeah.
But at least with websites, I don't want to talk about other asset classes, other investments. I'll let people say that for themselves. But when I tell people about websites, I would say that if you're going to buy a website, there's no website that you're going to buy and it will sit there and just forever make you money and you collect a check without you doing anything to it. So at a that's why I talk about having a little bit of extra, a little bit of extra budget, or selling guest posts to pay for new content, right? Even if that just like makes it a break even on the content side of things. Past results is not indicative of past performance is not indicative of future results, is sort of the old adage in finance, right? In stocks. Yeah. And that's the same here. I would never say that just because something is done well, it will do well in the future. So I would be cognizant that you are likely to slowly lose traffic unless you at least maintain the website, and try and grow it. And that's one reason I talk more about flipping than just buying and holding, because buying and holding sounds like you just buy it and it sits in your pocket and it hands you a paycheck. That's just not the reality. Websites are a business, and every business in the world is dynamic. There's no static business that just sits there and, it's not an investment. You are buying the whole thing. It's not where someone's just handing you a check every month. So I would be cognizant in the fact that there is a bare minimum of new content that you should be adding to the website, even if it's going to change for each website, but I would be adding an article a month at least, right? I'd be adding an article a week, So if that means spending $25 a month to get something going, and to offset that, you need to, sell a guest post, or I would probably tell you at that point, if you're at that budget, you should probably just spend the 2 hours writing that article yourself.
Yeah, realistically, if it's one article a week, you should be doing it.
Yeah. And the reality is, the reason that flipping becomes exciting to people is because, to circle back to that multiple you asked about, how much do websites sell for, right? Is that's where your delta, that's where your change is going to come from, or your alpha, your gain is going to come from. And that is because if I improve a website for $100 a month, let's say I buy a website for $3,000, it's making $1,000 a month, right? And I only improve it by 10%. I make $100 more a month. Now that's really not rocket science, right? Now you might be like, oh, well, that was not really worth it to me. It's only $100, and I had to put in, over the year, it took me, I don't know, 20 hours. I'm making this up, right? But it's not an unreasonable thing, right?
Yeah.
It's an article every 2 weeks, and maybe a little upfront work into changing the ad network. Well, cool, you made an extra $1,200. You're not super excited about that, right? For your 20 hours. That's not terrible pay, but now when you go sell it, again, it's selling for a multiple of that revenue, right? So that extra $100, right, that extra $1,200 a year is an extra $3,600 when you sell it, right? So now if I improve a website by $100 a month, and this is actually an interesting metric to think about. For every $100 a month that I improve a website, if I wait a year to sell it, I'll make an extra $4,800 off that $100 improvement, right? That's a 48x on that difference. And so that becomes really compelling. And that's why the flipping function makes this exciting. Actually, it's literally why all value-added private equity firms do exactly what they do, right? Which is they buy businesses, they improve them, and then they exit them, right? That's sort of how the model works. We're just trying to do it on a micro scale.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when it's PE, they tend to come in and cut all the costs and turn off the lights and everything.
They do things like refinance debt with their own debt, right? Like they buy a company that's got debt at 15% a year. They have a giant fund. When they buy it, they refinance that 15 with their own debt at 5% a year. That changes the EBITDA. But the reality is, take away all the crazy complexities of private equity firms, value-added private equity firms, right? Like it's really what we're talking about doing here, right? We're talking about buying an asset, improving it marginally, right? And then selling it at a multiple for that marginal improvement. That's how you do this safely and make money, right? What gets scary and dangerous is saying, I'm going to buy a website for $5,000 and I'm going to make it worth $1 million and then sell it. That's sure. I hope you have a win like that, but you're much better off buying a website for $10,000. That makes $3,000 a year, turning it into $3,500 a year, right? And then getting an extra $2,000 in the sale because of that multiple that you pull out, right?
And how quickly would you have to wait a year so you've got a full year of revenue before you sell it?
I mean, that's really, again, that's a moving target. A year is a safe bet because, again, when we look at, most people are going to look at what we call like a trailing 12, so your last 12 months of revenue, right?
Yeah.
So, you could do it earlier. You're just less likely. If I'm buying a website and I see that only the website's revenue has been good for the last 2 months, I'm not going to give you the same multiple I am. I'm not going to pay you the same amount for it if it's had that great revenue for 12 months, right? 12 months sort of signifies to buyers like myself, like, is this stable? Is this realistic? And is it something when I buy is not just going to disappear revenue-wise? So, yeah. And the other reality is that there's a couple of changes that you're going to make quickly, like changing an ad network, maybe selling guest posts. But the real reality is, like, some of the longer term stuff, when we talk about SEO, like new content, or we talk about building a newsletter, that's going to take you 6 to 12 months to really gain some traction in, right? It's just let's say you're only getting 100 new subscribers a month, right? For your newsletters that you just implemented. Well, that feels like nothing initially, right? Because maybe you're getting a 30% open rate, right? And so only 30 people are reading each email. Like, feels like a waste, but that's not really true, right? Because that 100%, that 100 subscribers a month over 12 months, ends up adding up, right? And so at the end, it becomes a juicier thing for the buyer to buy. So when I talk about flipping websites, I really, really think about at least a 6-month hold, but really a 12-month hold, because again, the new buyer is going to want to look at your trailing 12 months revenue, and you want to show that the improvements that you've made have actually come to fruition, so you can capture the value from that.
And are there any headwinds you can see in the industry that could impact the potential for people to sell their website or even grow organic traffic? I know there's been a lot of talk about Google's, obviously you mentioned looking back and saying, okay, there must have been 3 or 4 algorithm updates and this website hasn't been affected. But certainly if you were taking a smaller website with less of a brand, there's been rumors around Google looking for branded content. So, placing more emphasis. And I guess that comes down to the DA as well on the site.
Yeah, I mean, headwinds are, and one thing I want to be clear about DA is like, DA is not even like a Google metric, like, to be honest with you, right? Like it used to be called PR, is what we were talking, that was PageRank, right? This is, again, PageRank has not existed forever. And that actually was Google's actual number they assigned you for the rank, the quality of what your page was. PR doesn't even exist anymore, I don't think. DA is like a sort of third-party metric that we all have agreed in the industry happens to be a good way of ranking the quality of Google's thoughts of your website. But there's other factors included as well, right? Like you'll see websites with a DA of 0 create beautiful content, and Google really what they're looking for here is your content what people are searching for, right? Because like all Google cares about is like continuing to be the incumbent beast that no one can ever tackle. And that's because everyone wants to go to Google for all their information. And the only reason that people want to go back to Google is because when they search, they actually find what they're looking for, right? So I'd say that like the one sort of amorphous metric that is more important than DA is like, are you creating content that is useful for the searcher? That is Google's long-term goal here, is it like, that's where they're getting at. And that DA is based on how many backlinks you have and things like that, right? Like to show, and that's how we're guessing Google measures the quality of a website. But headwinds are definitely going to be updates from Google's perspective, right? There are always new ones. Headwinds are also going to be Google making money, right? Like years ago, when you go Google something, it used to just be like 1 or 2 ads, right? Because that's how.
Yeah, I mean, this is personal to me. The reason that I shifted to YouTube content above, written content, was especially in the personal finance niche. It's just so much crap. Like you've got 3 or 4 ads up top. You've got the ads at the bottom of the page. You've got the snippets.
Dude, snippets are a huge thing too. Yeah.
Yeah, people don't even go on, for a lot of search terms, Google is trying to keep people on Google rather than going through to websites. So in the personal finance niche, especially for certain keyword terms, it's so competitive to rank because you've got people willing to pay 10 or 20 quid a click on some terms. You're just like, wow, how am I going to get organic traffic on that basis?
So the biggest thing is, you're right, is to remember that Google needs to make money too, right? And the way they make money is getting people to click on their ads, right? And so like, obviously they want to serve people good and useful content, but that also doesn't come, it's a fine balance between that and making sure that they're serving ads to people, right? And people click on what things that people are paying for them to click on. So Google algo updates and sort of just how they change everything is pretty major there, right? One other thing I try and avoid if I'm looking at websites to buy, and avoid websites that have what are called PBNs, so private blog networks that rank them. And it's just because like those are backlinks that you don't have any control over, and they might disappear, and Google hates those. If they catch on to them, will very often what we call sandbox websites, so move them from the search results. Even though you can show up in search results, you don't rank for any of your keywords you want to rank for. But yeah, I mean, the other part of it is just competition, right? I think this is a really exciting and hot time to get into this space. I've been around it for a little while myself, but it's all of this is market based, right? Supply and demand, right? And so part of your competition is going to be, when you're buying websites, is that like the more big money that comes into this, the more they set a baseline for what a multiple of a website is worth, which means that all websites end up becoming worth more money, and you end up having to pay more to buy a website. With that said, it also means you probably get to sell a website for more money as well. But as long as we're sticking on the Google thing here, like not getting into newsletters, which we could talk about, like ESPs and like deliverability, and like there's too many other lessons in that. Let's stick to organic search traffic. It's just you're susceptible to Google's updates, and you're susceptible to bigger money coming into this and spending more money to outrank you, right? And that goes back to why, like, I have a good cursory functioning understanding of SEO, but I'm not an SEO. Like, that's not it's not the channel that I go hard on. It's the channel that we always work on. It's always in the background, but it's not my bread and butter, partially because it requires patience. I'm incredibly impatient.
It really does.
And it's tough, and it's a really tough channel.
So what's your favorite channel at the moment?
So the business I just bought and the ones that we're rolling up and buying right now is all paid, right? We actually have a very robust SEO program that we're working on, but I don't expect to see any results from that for the next year or two.
Yeah.
And so that's, with that said, that business will do $5 million this year, right? So we're happy to spend a couple $100,000 over the next 2 years to hopefully then see a return come in spades a long time down the road. Right?
And is that a content play or is that a physical?
No, that is an e-commerce website. That is an e-commerce website. But again, so to be really clear, the last website I sold was a content website. It was a massive content website. 3 million uniques, 40,000 email subscribers, very big, right? I mean, not like BuzzFeed big, but very big for a niche.
Nice. What was the niche?
Financial news content in the cannabis sector.
So, yes, you said earlier.
Yeah, very niche. And I would say that if someone can find things that are niche, that are also sort of gray areas like that you'll find yourself in a very profitable little world. Partially because most of the big competitors won't come in, right? They just won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And if you can figure out how to monetize it, the people that will pay you to have ads on your website will pay you lots more money than normal, because they don't have access to normal ad, right? So
it's definitely a big amount of money to be made for anyone looking to just start, not even to buy a site, but to start a site. If you can identify something that's going to trend as a new subject, whether it's cannabis or crypto, something that's just emerging, it's nascent, then you're not going to have any ads to compete against, and you're not going to have any existing content. So
I also always say that all ships rise on high tide. People always ask me, like, what's the easiest way to buy a good website? Well, again, just like you said, find one in an industry that's growing massively, right? Like incredibly quickly. Because like if I'm ranking for search terms and all of a sudden over the next year, the search volume, the amount of people searching for them 10x's, then without me doing anything, I'm going to 10x my traffic and inherently 10x my money, right?
Yeah.
So, like I'm out of that space, like equities, markets, news for cannabis, but I would say like the next one I see is really big is like psychedelics. Like that's a really big space that's starting to blow up that hasn't really blown up yet. Like there's as a legal function, I mean, right? I don't mean like eating acid and mushrooms to get high. I mean like from like medicinal purposes, right?
Yeah.
But stuff like that, crypto, niche down. Want to write about Bitcoin? Good luck. Like you're just going to go compete against it. But if you want to go write about like obscure DeFi, decentralized finance protocols in the crypto space that have like smaller tokens attached to them, like, yeah, you might be able to go rank for those really quickly and find people that are super interested looking for it, right?
Yeah.
And that's a not best example, but find that about anything, right? Like if we're talking about a knitting website, I wouldn't write about like how to knit. I'd go write about like the newest like alpaca-based yarn. You know what I'm trying to say? Like niche down and get something interesting, right? That's easier to rank for as opposed to trying to go broad. In this game, we're going niche, we're not going broad. That's a very important thing.
Yeah, I mean, from personal experience, broad and personal finance, which is an established topic, is tough. You've got to do something different, which is certainly why we create all this sometimes kind of ridiculous content, like little kidnapping skits that we do.
Yeah, I mean, but I don't know. I find myself in a similar vein, right? Where it's like you're sort of battling. The reality is for me, it's all angle, right? To get to marketing jargon, it's all angle, right? Because we're all talking about teaching the same stuff, right? If I all of a sudden said, buy a business, zero money down, you'd see 1,000 competitors in Google, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the most common thing on the planet, right? The thing is for me, mine's just digital real estate, right? It's easy for me to talk about like, how do you invest in website as a digital asset class? Now, there's not nearly as much competition in that, right? But we're using the same tenets here. So for you can teach personal finance by being more creative and getting a specific angle, but it might not be like totally different lessons that they might learn somewhere else. It might just be taught in a way that's more palatable and more interesting and doesn't have a ton of competition, right? And whatever is the best way for people to get information, I'm all for it.
Yeah. I think certainly YouTube is underutilized from that respect, because people don't realize it's the second largest website in the world. It's the second largest search engine in the world. So it's a great place to go if you want to start making content about a niche. Then, and we're seeing it now. Google is starting to integrate YouTube into snippets. So for certain search terms at the top of the research results, you'll get YouTube videos. So it is definitely a good way to kind of attack it from making a video and then turning it into an article. I think is one of the best ways to double down on content creation. And that's actually a good point to you. Like, some of my videos get hundreds of daily views just because I've syndicated the content, and I've taken the video and I've turned it into a blog post, and I've embedded the video at the top of the blog post, and it's on Medium, and it's become a popular topic. And there's no effort. All I had to do was copy and paste or write a script, 25 minutes out of my day to get an extra 100 views a day, which compounds over time.
I mean, listen, I don't want to tell people, I'm very honest about being a complete idiot at a lot of things, and I'm a complete idiot with YouTube. So I don't want to push people to YouTube, but what I will say is that, like, it's clear to me YouTube is a phenomenal channel for organic. And I would really recommend that anyone that's looking at getting into website flipping or buying and holding websites to explore that, because I've only have two videos on YouTube. I have my NanoFlips website and my NanoFlips YouTube channel. And like, I'm going to grow the NanoFlips YouTube channel because I'm recognizing that even just from a little bit of posting, like it's not like Twitter. I have a big Twitter following, and I tweet on Twitter, it gets seen, and then it disappears. Right?
Yeah.
What's crazy about YouTube, and why it's even more powerful than Google to me, from what I'm recognizing, is Google is search. YouTube is search also, but like you and I were speaking about, YouTube is also discovery, which is like a whole, recommended videos homepage, right? So like, I'm not positive I am in the best place to recommend people go and build hundreds of YouTube videos, because I'm very new to it, right? But I'm very long on YouTube. I'm very bullish, interested in it as a product and as a great channel. And I think, to your point, if we were to get more complex about how to build content for a website, yeah, if the easiest thing for you is to talk to a camera for YouTube, go build a YouTube video, go find someone that will turn that YouTube video into a blog piece for you if you don't want to write it.
Could even transcribe it automatically,
and just edit it 100%. Oh, and by the way, then post it to Twitter as well. Like, you're going to find the channel that works best for you. It happens to be that most of the websites people are buying, their channel is going to be organic search, is going to be Google. And that's why I talk about it a lot. I'm very interested in YouTube. I want to grow my YouTube. I think it's a huge opportunity, and for everyone.
Yeah, go check out NanoFlips on YouTube.
yeah, check me out, please subscribe. But no, I mean, in all honesty, also to your point, like, I recognize that some of the websites, one of the videos I made on YouTube, it's not ranking like #1 on Google, but it is ranking on Google search, right? Too, like just the video itself. So I'm super interested in this world of video content creation.
I think all of these sites or platforms for content creation are just another way to drive more traffic to your business. It doesn't have to be about, I'm going to be a content creator, I'm going to make money from Google AdSense on YouTube or any other platform. Or, I think TikTok has a creator fund and so on. You can always drive traffic if you're getting. It all adds up, especially if you're syndicating content. I'm making one video, I'm turning it into a blog post, and you can turn it into TikTok, Instagram, Facebook posts, as much as you can be bothered, and link to your website. If you end up getting thousands of views, it just adds a percentage of that of people will click through your website, and you can increase the value of that site.
And I think to go along with that is that, like, as long as we're on the topic of owning your traffic, which is really important here, right? I think I don't want people to forget that whether it's YouTube or Twitter or Instagram, like, you don't own that in any regard. It's almost a trope at this point to say it, but you don't own it. It's just sort of, they own it, they can take it from you in an instant. That's why I love email lists, right? Because email lists, I fully own that data, I can take it wherever I want and do whatever I want with it, right? But as long as we're talking about owning, in terms of website flipping and monetization, right, is that, like, even ad networks at all are really the lowest level of you making money. Right? But like, there's a lot more. Let's say you're talking about personal finance, right? Like, I'm not using you as an example. Let's say we're talking about personal finance. Like, I'll use Credit Karma, for example, right? Massive app, right? For people to check their credit score. Credit Karma makes their money on affiliate dollars, right? From getting you to sign up for credit cards and to take loans. So they get fees and I mean, I used to have credit card offers we pushed, and I think you sign up to an Amex card to them, they probably make $500 or $600, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, and then the real value is if you can be a creator, if you can own the back end, right? So I sometimes talk about like putting an e-commerce store on top. I'll give you, like, let's say you review toys. I don't know, you're some YouTuber that reviews toys. Well, if you can then direct them to your Toys R Us store that you own, that'd be the best way to monetize those people. I'm going to make that up as an example. But for me, with the website flipping stuff, it's a course, right? Like I can make money from having ads all over everything, but I don't, because for me, I want people to end up buying. I don't even have a course yet, but I'm launching this course. I want people to buy it, right? So it's this, when I talk on monetization, you want to own the back end as much as possible. And an ad network, to be clear, for owning your customer, right? Like an ad network is just a broker. I used to own an ad network, right? Somebody else is paying them for clicks that they're getting from you, and they take a vig, they're taking a margin on top, right? So if you can sell ads directly to someone, you're going to probably make a bit more money. Or if you can own the back end product, that would be an ad, right? Like put a banner for your own products, you're going to make the most money possible. So it's a little weird, but it's the truth.
No, it's great. It's great advice, right? It's kind of just improving margins any way you can, and maximizing the lifetime value of a customer by selling as much as you can.
Well, and to LTV is a great point. There's an old Dan Kennedy quote, old big marketing quote, which is, "He who can pay the most for a customer wins." Well, the only way you can pay the most for a customer, you talked a couple of times about trying to compete against giant venture-backed personal finance blogs, right? Well, it's because they're willing to pay more for a customer than you, right? And that's because they understand their LTV, the lifetime value of a customer, right? So they can raise money against that LTV. They say, hey, each customer's worth $1,000 to us, so we'll pay $999 acquiring each customer, right? That's just a function of like not.
That drives me nuts, right?
Well,
Race to the bottom.
Dude, it's impossible. But so how do you improve on that? I think email lists is a fantastic way to improve on that. Retention, right? Like, because an ad, you can make money from an ad, that person may never ever come back to you, right? So that customer's lifetime value is the moment they're on your website. That lifetime is this big, right? But if you can own them on YouTube or an email, not that you own them on YouTube, but if you can have YouTube subscribers or Twitter followers or Instagram followers or an email list that you own, the lifetime value of that customer, every time they come back, grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. And so you're just going to make a lot more money in the long run.
Yeah. And probably the last question I got for you is, what's your favorite page traffic source at the moment?
So we spend $4,000 or $5,000 a day on Facebook and Instagram currently. But what I would say is that there are other channels that are video based that I believe are a massive opportunity. YouTube is really, we were not there yet, but YouTube is really where I'm looking at spending a lot of money. And that's just because you get a couple things with YouTube that you don't get with Facebook and Instagram. You get search intent. So with Facebook and Instagram, you're hoping to disrupt people while they're doing what they're doing. Yeah. YouTube, you can actually bid on search the same way you can with Google, right? So which is really exciting. The other side with YouTube is that they've got some really interesting ad products that, for instance, if you're paying per view, like they won't charge you unless somebody has watched a certain amount of a video or they've clicked through to watch your video ad.
Yeah.
Right? So that means you're really only paying for people that are actually really interested, right? Like versus like Facebook, where I pay per click. I mean, at one point we're spending say $4,500 a day on this one project, and 30% of people are bouncing, right? So that means that they're not even clicking anything on our website or doing anything. So that means that we're spending $1,500 a day on people that just don't even see our website, right? Like, because our load time is so slow. That's a whole different story. But my point is like that with some YouTube ad functions, that's just not possible, right? Like you're only going to pay if they've actually watched your ad, right?
Do you think that YouTube applies to e-commerce though?
Oh yeah. I know. Oh yeah. So info product world, course creators, coaches, that's YouTube's like bread and butter right now. People are printing printing money with that is what I'd say. Like I know people that are doing.
Shit, I need to get on this. Start selling people.
I know people that are clearing out easy 500K a month in profit on YouTube that are 24, 25 years old. That's not the norm. I want to make that abundantly
Selling
clear.
what exactly?
Just selling courses. Selling courses.
Really?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. But that also requires being really, really good. Two things. It requires being really good on paid traffic. It requires really understanding the ad structure. Also requires a high enough product cost, right? So like they're normally selling like $2,000 plus courses, right? So they can spend, if you sell a $2,000 product, I can spend $1,999 acquiring that customer, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is that a $2,000 product, you're probably burning 20K in testing before you find anything that's really working for you, right? And so it's complex and it's weird. They just understand their LTV. They understand their lifetime value. They've got normally a tripwire for $5 or $10 or $15 that gets people into their funnel, that they're just breaking even on that front end or losing a little bit of money on the first customer. And then a month down the line, they're selling them on a $2,000 course, right? That they're making money off of. But point is, I think for the right products, YouTube is 100% works for. I mean, actually, I know it works for e-commerce, right? It just has to be the right product. Although with that said, if you're, you can be retargeting on YouTube as well, right? Like you could find someone on Google through search and then retarget them with an ad for your iPhone case. I mean, you said it earlier, YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world. People search for everything on YouTube, everything. So, best iPhone cases. Okay, pop ads for iPhone cases, right? I'm really serious here, right? Like, best running shoe for people, for beginner runners. Great. So I 100% think it can work for e-commerce. I haven't figured it out yet. Again, that's why I'm not telling anyone to go spend money on YouTube or go build YouTube videos. But I personally know people that are doing very, very, very well with YouTube, not just organically like yourself, but with paid traffic as well.
Oh, we run paid traffic on some of our videos, right? It's part of the game. How do you grow when you got to put money behind it like you would with any business?
Yeah. You got it. I mean, that's the thing is like understanding. Again, not to divert too far away from here, but because we're talking about content websites a lot, but if we're talking about e-commerce websites or a course, which would be a website, right? Like, everything sits on a website today. That's why when people say, how do I get into website flipping? Or how do I invest in websites? Like, it's so vague, right? Like, what kind of website, Or we're talking about affiliate marketing, right? Like lead generation, that's a website as well. My point is, it's like just about understanding your funnel and your LTV, your lifetime value of your customer. Because, for instance, like book to call funnels will close a lot easier. Let's say you're selling a $300 course, right? You might have a really hard time getting that profitable, getting them to convert by putting their credit card in on the phone. But if every single person, you got them to go to a video sales letter or short webinar that they watched, and at the end of it, you offered to have them take a one-on-one call with you to discuss it and see if it was a good fit. Oh, and by the way, when they got on that call, you had pre-qualifying questions when they booked. I said, how much are you willing to spend on your business, right? And anyone that didn't qualify themselves as willing to spend enough of the price for the course, you automatically turn them down and said, I don't think you're a good fit for this. I would recommend you start doing some reading here, right?
Yeah.
That means everyone that gets on your phone already knows the price of what you're looking for, has already been primed, they know what they're looking for, and that's just up to you to close them. And you'll go from 2% conversion rates to like 25, 30% conversion rates, because now they're on the phone with the actual person they're just watching that video, who's helping answer their questions and solve problems for them right there. And so, my point is like, there's buttons to push and levers to pull about how to convert better. That's not an incredibly scalable model, but it makes it a lot easier to convert. And so that understanding how valuable your customer is to you in the long run and the best conversion for that makes paid traffic just a different world. And if it's not a world that you're comfortable in, and you mess up, you can just burn hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, right? Trying to make it work. So
very, very dangerous to go into it without being prolific at experimenting and being very brutal when it's not working out. If you're not making profit, then just cut it off.
100%. And be willing to lose money in that experimenting, right? Like that's, that's one, whenever I talk to people about paid, the one thing I say is like, I can teach anyone how to run retargeting ads. I can, right? Like it's not rocket science, right? So retargeting, you're getting good organic traffic, you want to try paid, try some retargeting, right? That's to bring people back into your product, right? It's not a guaranteed win, but you're infinitely more likely to win with that than you are on cold traffic, which is just like I'll put it this way. If it was easy, no one would teach it. No one would ever take an agency job. They would just be spawning. If like drop shipping was super easy, like everyone guru says to you, they would just print money. They would just sell things all day. They wouldn't need to teach you anything, right? Like I mean, even with me with the core stuff, right? Like functionally, like I buy businesses that are long-term processes, right? That like I'm not pulling any money out of, right? Of course, I want to make some money selling a course. I'm not Mother Teresa, right? There's nothing like wholly altruistic about me, right? But if I can also teach people and make money, then what a beautiful, beautiful synergy that is, right? So I would just be aware that when you go to spend money, that it's a really, really scary, complex game. With ads.
That's putting it lightly, but you've got to be open to it. If you're going to start a business, then you're going to have to make an investment at some point.
100%, 100%. And that's why, I mean, I'll tell you, this is as old as time. It's not me, but there are tons of people that sell courses similar to what I talk about, and everyone will tell you it's as long as you have the money, it's easier to buy than build, right? Like you can make a lot more money building, right? Because you go from zero, you get all the gain going from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
But odds of success, right? Like if I said you got $100,000, do I think you're more likely to win by buying a business for $100,000 or to spend $100,000 trying to build a business from scratch?
Yeah.
I would say that for some of you, if you got a great idea, maybe you should build. But I would say that the majority of people will be more likely to win by buying. Right?
Yeah, it's so much harder going from 0 to 1 than it is taking something from 1 to 100.
Yeah, and it's that simple. That's the thesis of buying businesses. There, 100%.
Yeah. What 3 skills would you recommend to someone that wants to get into building content sites and monetizing them, or even buying and selling?
I would say due diligence. Like it sounds so stupid, but like research, like really understanding what's really there. Like half people fail because they just buy a con, right? They buy something that's bad that's been packaged up in a pretty way.
Yeah.
So in terms of due diligence, I'd make sure I'd really understood SEO. So like me, right? Like I understand it, right? But I'm not some master at it, right? But I can go open Ahrefs and dig through and see if backlinks are spam backlinks, see how the rankings have been looking, see what the DA looks like, see if the content looks good. Just really get your BS detector really good, right? Like because it passed the sniff test. And then I would say that if you're unlike me and you're smart, I would go learn SEO and content writing, being a great writer, a great creator. I'm really not. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I've had $0 in my pocket, how many times I've really screwed up and I've thrown money down the drain. And if I just had patience and been great at creating content, it would have saved me. So writing, understanding the basics of SEO, just to make sure that what your what the long-term goals can be, and then patience. I mean, it sounds so stupid, but like really having patience is like crazy key. Most things can get pretty handheld these days. You want to do on-page SEO, get a plugin called Yoast, right? It'll tell you a lot of what you need to be doing to change the content around. Like I can show people software that helps them recognize what is the right wordage and verbiage and content, right? If you want to be better at monetizing ads, I'd use something like Ezoic. They're basically an outsourced ad ops agency that uses AI will make your ads worth more to you. And that's why I say, like, honestly, anyone who's really patient, anyone who has learned the basic tenets of maintenance of a content website, right? Like writing being a main one. And anyone that is willing to put in the due diligence and have the patience to find the right website for them, they can win, right? It's easy to win. It's not impossible to take websites and make them 20% better, 30% better. or 100%, but it's safer to say 10 or 20, 30, right? And you get good enough that you're willing to take out debt to do it. You get good enough that you're willing to get investors on. So learning due diligence, like learning, understanding backlink profiles and on-page SEO, content creation, and patience. I mean, those are the three sort of skills that from there, like a quick YouTube or Google search will get you ready for the rest of it. I'm really serious, right? Like,
yeah, you can learn everything online. I think the big point to make is there's no golden ticket. You got to put the effort in and go away and learn this stuff.
100%. It's like when I'm working on an offering that's much more handheld, right? But that handheld is more like I help people create a go-to-market strategy, and then we have check-ins because every month it's going to pivot, right? I mean, it's not as if you just make one plan and you follow it and you win. Right? It's not that. Like I said, these are dynamic, these are living, these are breathing, these are ever changing. There's too many variables for everything to ever be simple and just very plain. So it's, being malleable and have the ability to pivot and understand that a lot of it is going to be nuanced and art, right? Not science, right? Like there's obviously algorithms are based on science, but I think you get my point, right? You got to figure out a bit of it, how it works for you yourself.
You have to. I always say you've got to experiment prolifically, because Google or YouTube or any other system is not going to tell you how its algorithm works, because they know that people are going to gamify it, and the whole point is that they are after intent. So if you want to figure out how something works and get the best results, and you really just got to put yourself out there and try as many different things and as many variations of those things as possible, until you see something that's working, and when you find that thing, you double down on it.
There's actually, along that point, there's some tools I'm experimenting with, and I'm happy to recommend once I've proven they work. But they basically allow you to do some of these on-page experiments, and more like experiments with basically the way to explain it is like what you actually see in the search. Because here's something that people don't really think about. You rank number 1 in Google, but the text that Google is showing for you is not intriguing. You're just going to get way lower CTR, way lower click-through rate, right? So let's say you buy a website that's already ranking well. Well, you actually might be able to just make small changes that instantly make you get more traffic, because more people click through it, because more. So there's a couple tools that are basically allow you to do that at scale, and will connect to like Google Search Console and analytics for you, right? And say like within a week, oh, like these changes made sense, these ones work, these ones need to switch back, right? Nice. So there's new tools every day that are making this easier. I bet that's the same with YouTube, right?
Click through is important. It's something that they look at for you. That's why you got to get the thumbnail, the title, and description right, whether it's Google or YouTube. It's the same approach. So it's only the start, right? Because you've got to have that time with Google. It's that time on the landing page needs to be significant. So the average time on that landing page, and with YouTube, it's the watch time. They don't just want people clicking through and bouncing.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and we could do a whole 10 hours on Google, and I wouldn't be the person to even do it, to be honest with you, right? Like, I'm one of those people that through like forcing my way through a circle through a square peg or whatever, right? Because like I'm really not great at anything, right? I'm just like good at a bunch of stuff, right? And what I've realized is that for me, because I'm not a master at SEO, I'm not a master at paid. Like I don't run our paid, right? We pay a media buying agency to run our paid traffic for us, right? We pay them like $14,000 a month, right? To like just on their retainer. Forget what we pay for the traffic, right? That doesn't include copy or creative or anything. That's just the media buyers themselves, right? But so I found my easiest way to win is to sit like 30,000 feet up and try and direct the traffic like an air traffic controller, right? Like I don't want to fly the plane.
Exactly where I prefer to be, right? Jack of all trades, master of none. But I get good enough at something, and then get good enough at 5 different things, and then suddenly that's quite powerful, right?
Well, and you can know who to hire and who not to hire, right? Most importantly, right? Like in the long run, right? Like you're just good at making it happen overall. Like I can build a website, I can rank content, but I'm not phenomenal at all these things. But like more importantly, when you get to the point where, not that I'm anywhere that's impressive or where I want to be, But when you're running businesses that are doing $5 million a year, trying to get multiple of them, it allows you to, like, people say to me, like, oh, well, how do I know how to hire? Who's a good one? Well, that's an art. Like, I don't know. Like, I guess you can give them writing tests. You can ask them a million questions, right? But like, you have to have a fundamental understanding of how these things work yourself to
Absolutely. be. Anytime anyone comes to me and says, I'm thinking of hiring an agency for my ad spend, I'm like, well, have you tried doing it yourself first? Because you really, if you want to determine whether someone else is good at their job, you need to know what they're doing, because there are so many people that will pull the wool over your eyes and charge you a fortune for doing absolutely nothing.
Well, and to that point, you asked earlier, like, where are good places for people to get content written for them, right? Or backlinks built for them, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. Well, go start building some backlinks. Go start writing some content. Figure out what works for you. And then when you go hire someone, ask them to show you what they do, right? You can look at it immediately and be like, oh, those are spam backlinks. You know what I mean? Like sitting on SATE, which is like a Russian PBN network that's, or like that content is not SEO friendly. I'll never hire you to write that, right? So you don't have to be the best at everything, but I think that mentality of like understanding fundamentally how things work is pretty important for this size. Listen, you want to go buy $100 million business? Of course, I don't think you need to know how to run ads, right? Because you already got 2,000 people working there, right? You need to know how to be a CEO. But for everything we're talking about today, I really think it's important to have like a baseline fundamental understanding of how all of this works yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's great advice, man. We've definitely carried over and gone off on a rant. I hope people find it useful, right?
I just talk and talk and talk. This is why I got to find a channel that's better for me than Twitter, right? Because Twitter, I'm just like, I need something.
No, it's perfect now. I'm hoping you get, you'll add some nice buffer to my watch time here, where I don't even have to do much. I just sit here, get to learn stuff myself and ask all the questions.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, I think to sum a lot of like the minutia up is that, like, I genuinely believe in my heart of hearts, like from a personal finance perspective, is that if you can spend a little bit of time understanding the complexities of websites and how they drive traffic and how they make money, that like cash on cash return, definitely not the safest, right? I don't want to pretend it is, right? Like, go buy government municipal muni bonds if you really want the safest investment of your money, But I would say that like cash on cash return is one of the best investments on our websites. I genuinely believe that, or digital properties. And it's one of the few things in this world where you can put in X effort and get massive multiples of return for what you do.
Even at the, one of my favorite takeaways for anyone without money to put down was what you said about selling guest posts. It is so easy to do. You could have a couple of $100 in side income, passive income from one website, and then build 10 niches. If you're in college and you don't have a lot, you've got some time on your hands.
I mean, and if you, by the way, you want to grind it out, cool. Go get a program called Wizza, right? Or go take any, or Clean Leads, as my friends want. But basically, go find like a lead scraping tool. Go pay for LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Your website is about personal finance. Excellent. We're going to go pull every VP of marketing at a company that's over 10 people that has, from some LinkedIn Sales Navigator, pull their email addresses. We're going to go write them one by one. We're going to write them and send them emails saying, hey, just reaching out because I have a blog in the personal finance space. We're offering guest posts. We're charging blankety blank. Here's our media kit. We get this much traffic. Our DA is this. We're reaching out to see if you're interested. Yeah, 9 out of 10 people are going to say no, thank you, right? But like, the truth is, the truth is the 1 out of 10, it's just how much is your time worth to you, right? Like, because if you're making $50 for that, right? Oh, by the way, if they're good guest posts, that's also your free organic content, right? Like, bad guest posts are going to be spammy, right? That's just extra cash. Good guest posts are going to be free organic content. We were talking about how you maintain a website. Well, if I got NerdWallet to write my guest post for me, promise you it's good enough quality that it's going to look nice in Google's eyes, right? From a personal finance perspective, right? So you're a college kid. You're down because of the pandemic. Like, one thing I do not do and I refuse to do is like tell people to buy websites.
Yeah.
That's totally them. I worked in public markets for a long time. I never told anyone to buy a stock. It makes me uncomfortable, but I'm happy to give people the tools to hunt for themselves, right? But let's say you're doing that. I don't know. You got an extra 2 hours a night? Send those 10 emails a night. I don't know, like lock in one guest post, make that $50, make that $30. I don't know. Like, are you doing it while you watch Netflix? It is that easy, right? It really is. And in that regard, yeah, buy a website pay a little bit extra for a website that's super good and safe, right? That is high quality. I'd rather you pay 40 times monthly revenue than 36 and not have it fall apart on you, right? So.
Absolutely. I love it.